This is Art of Roman Daily Life from 509 before the Common Era to 337 in the Common Era. So the area that we'll be looking at today grew from the city itself of Rome out into the peninsula of Italy and then subsequently all across the Mediterranean coast. So in this first map, we can see the first stages that would later become what we would call the Roman Empire, one of the largest and most powerful empires that this world has ever known. So the first layer of expansion is into the Italian peninsula. And then finally, here in this map, we can see Rome at its greatest geographical expanse. This is under the Emperor Trajan, and this map depicts Rome in 117 in the Common Era. Subsequently, as the empire got too big to handle, it had to be divided up into what we call the tetrarchy. This is the rule of four. And so each area had a different sort of governor who functioned underneath the emperor. So today we'll be talking about the art of daily life as opposed to the art of empire, which is pretty much normally what you see and learn about when we talk about Rome. But I wanted to kind of get a little bit of a more personal and private view of how art and architecture would have impacted the daily lives of people in the Roman Empire, both in Rome itself and in the colonies that became part of the empire. So in 753, before the Common Era, we have this legendary founding of Rome. And here we have the two twins, Romulus and Remus. Romulus ultimately kills his brother Remus and goes on to found Rome. This is where we get the name Rome from, his name Romulus. And he becomes a sort of deity. He becomes godlike at his own death. And the legend goes that these two youngsters who were half divine, son of a god and a mortal woman, sons rather, were taken care of by a she-wolf in the wilderness. And so here we have this very, very famous image of the she-wolf suckling Romulus and Remus and enabling them to live and to go on and found this great empire. This itself is much, much later. This is probably a medieval and potentially early modern sculpture. The scholarship is still out on it, but nevertheless, this is the best known image of the she-wolf with Romulus and Remus. So from 753, when Romulus becomes the first king of Rome, we have kings until 509 before the Common Era. The kings become increasingly autocratic, tyrannical, terrible, and they're eventually overthrown, and the Republic is installed. The Republic, from the words res publica, the public thing, is a type of governance in which citizens have say in the government, right? We have this Senate system, elected officials, voting, and civic rights, essentially. So the Republic is designed to hear the voices of the people. And then over time, the voices become too loud, too many, too discordant. And ultimately, we need the hands of one person to run this enormous geographical expanse of what becomes Rome. And in 44 before the Common Era, as you probably know, Julius Caesar is assassinated on the Ides of March, and this plunges the city into yet another civil war. And in order to recover from the pernicious, violent civil wars that are racking the Republic, ultimately, the Emperor Augustus seizes power. At this point, he is just Octavian, and he conquers Mark Antony and Cleopatra in 31 before the Common Era at the famous Battle of Actium. And in 27 before the Common Era, declares himself princeps, first among many. And this is the start of the empire. And so from this point in 27 before the Common Era, for almost 200 years, we have peace and stability and growth and fortune and wealth for the Roman citizens. This is the period known as the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. The Roman Empire carries on, and just like every government system, increasingly becomes corrupt, becomes disjointed. Rome itself is plagued from within with all kinds of corruption and problems with governance and administration and all kinds of civic works that are collapsing. And the empire is just basically too big to withstand itself. From outside, the Roman Empire is being invaded by Germanic tribes, Ostrogoths, Visigoths, all of these other different groups that are pushing on the northern boundaries of Rome. And so in 476, the last official Roman emperor is deposed and everything kind of breaks down. And this is the period that we refer to as the fall of Rome. So there you have it, the whole sort of political lineage of the area that we'll be looking at today. And my focus is ideally going to kind of illuminate what life is like being part of this huge political system that spans the known world all around the Mediterranean. So here we just have a little bit of a timeline, and you can see the main points here that we talked about, and you can look at this at your leisure. So I want to start with an overview of the city of Rome. And Rome has this reputation of being the center of its world, right? And when we think about, even today, thinking about America, we look to this glory of Rome, this city that worked really well, that had places for its citizens to have voice in their rule and to be proud of their city because of all of its impressive architecture and art. This is the center of culture in the ancient world. And so with this model, which actually took 35 years to build, this is a 1 to 250 ratio model. This shows us some of the great landmarks in ancient Rome that would have made its citizens very proud of it and boastful of it, and impressed with the outward appearance of this central capital city. So to start off here, we have the well-known Colosseum, or the Flavian Amphitheater, which we'll look at shortly. We have a series of temples. This one is dedicated to Venus. We have arches that are associated with military victories here and also here. And then we have the Roman Forum, which is the central area where people could gather, where people could give public speeches, where citizens would go to markets, et cetera. So it's this sort of bustling hub of Rome. And we also have places where we can see games and activities. So not only the Colosseum, but also here, the Circus Maximus. This is a huge racetrack for charioteer racing, and people would just go in droves and have these really riotous bets on their favorite teams. And then we can also see some of the infrastructure in the form of the aqueducts here, which would carry water to the center of the city. And then all around are administrative buildings, temples, law courts, all of these other things that are instrumental to the function of Rome. Here are the ruins of the Forum, and you have a little map here where you can see some of the main centers here. What you're looking at is the temple that is dedicated to Saturn, and this is a god of time. This is a god of sowing and reaping and growing. And having this temple here in the center of the Forum reminds us that for Roman people, religion was everywhere, and it was part of their civic identity. So as Rome is expanding in its imperial phase, it's conquering plenty of territories that are not adhering to the polytheistic Roman religion with this pantheon of gods, all of these different gods that are associated with different things, right? Minerva associated with wisdom, Venus associated with love and beauty, et cetera, et cetera. So as Rome is conquering these territories that might be, for example, Persian or North African, et cetera, Rome is imposing its religious identity, but allowing local religions to continue to flourish. So in the early period of the empire, we're not stamping out local identity, local culture, local languages, local traditions, local religion. This is becoming part of Rome. And so Rome is really effective because it lets people do their normal lives, but under this layer of Roman identity. And this is inherently linked to this civic religion. So you have to give lip service to the Roman religion, but you can continue to practice your own. And this is a really great way to make people kind of feel like they have a shared identity, even amidst polyculturalism. So we have temples in the center here. We have an arch that is dedicated to Septimius Severus, one of the military victories that he enacted. And these kinds of things being so prominently displayed in the center of Rome remind us also of the military strength and efficiency of the Roman army. We also have a rostrum. So the rostra here that you can see on the map, it's not really visible in this particular section, is a public platform where speeches could be given and debates could be held, orations given by orators, these public speakers would be projected into this place where all of the Romans are kind of coming and going through their daily business. So this central area, which also holds Curia, which is a law court that can hold 300 senators, this is just really the heart of Rome. And it would have been extremely impressive to view in its day. Another place that ordinary Romans would meet with people from different social statuses would be at the amphitheater. And so typically an amphitheater is kind of a semicircle that can seat in stadium seating thousands upon thousands of citizens. What you're seeing on the left here is the amphitheater in Pompeii, which is a city in Rome that was destroyed in 79 before the Common Era, in the Common Era, when the volcano Vesuvius, which is visible in the distance here on the left, erupted. And with this eruption, which happens periodically, it happened again, I think, in the 19th century, a blanket of ash fell on the city of Pompeii and also the nearby city of Herculaneum and just stopped the city in its tracks, right? People died instantly. And because of this ash, their bodies were actually preserved. And so in Pompeii today, you can see people who look like they just were frozen mid-action. And the city itself was preserved until its excavation. And so we learned a lot about daily life from Pompeii because of this sort of instantaneous freezing of time due to this eruption. So an amphitheater itself indicates that spectators are all around. That's what the original Greek term that gives us the word amphitheater means. And this was a place for people to come and watch gladiatorial combat, as you see here on the right in a fresco from Pompeii. So in this image, we can see the spectators are all in the stadium seating. We've got this combat going on here. We can see the entryways and the vaults that provide a sort of retaining wall for the stadium seating. And incidentally, in this very unique image, we can actually see the kind of canopy that could be drawn over the spectators to protect them from inclement weather, very strong sun, rain, etc. So what's important about the amphitheater is that it fosters this idea of common identity among all people. In the image from Pompeii, here we can see that there are stairs going up, which tells us that people were seated in the amphitheater according to rank. So the patricians, or the sort of upper class elite, would have been all the way down closest to the action, and then increasingly less important social statuses moving upwards to what we would call today the nosebleed seats. So women and slaves, for example, would be in the highest ranks furthest away from the action. And so you're encountering people from other social ranks, but you're not necessarily rubbing shoulders with them, right? There's still this social striation. And you might see gladiatorial combat, as I mentioned. You might see animals being beset on people like early Christians who were persecuted. And today, many of these amphitheaters that have been sort of reconstructed serve to host bullfighting events, for example, or concerts, because they have excellent acoustics. And in certain of the amphitheaters, if you stand in the center and drop a penny, you can actually hear it from the highest ranks of the seats. They're so expertly built. This is the most famous of the amphitheaters, the Flavian Amphitheater, which we also know as the Colosseum in Rome. And you can see this is heavily reconstructed. In the Middle Ages, because this was built so excellently and so perfectly as a masterpiece of engineering, to protect themselves from these invading Germanic tribes, early medieval people would actually live inside the amphitheater because it provided this kind of structural protection from invasion. And so what you see here are barrel vaults. These are rounded vaults that display the thrust and the weight of the vault into the columns that support it. And we'll see this as a style that later on goes to become known as Romanesque. So in the Roman style. And so here you have an authentic original version of it. And the idea of spectacle that's associated with the amphitheater is a way to kind of reward citizens of the Roman Empire, to keep people happy, to keep them entertained, especially in periods of strife or discord in the empire. And so this is the origin of the kind of motto, bread and circuses, things that you can give to the Romans to kind of distract them from any other kind of political ills that are going on. And so every time somebody came to the amphitheater for a gladiatorial show, for animals fighting, whatever they wanted to do, there's even an incident where the amphitheater was flooded and they had like a mock naval battle. So every time somebody who was a Roman citizen came to the amphitheater, they would be given a piece of bread to satisfy their hunger. And so this idea of bread and circuses is a way of sort of pacifying or mollifying the crowd. So here we have an image that is obviously a depiction of the Colosseum, and we can see that there are ferocious wild animals being released from this pit, and then they're going to attack and maul and kill these individuals. Here you're seeing Christians who are then martyred, killed for their faith in front of a huge jeering crowd of spectators. And again, you can see the distinct rows here ending with the kind of lowest class nosebleed section all the way at the top here. So this was entertainment for Rome. And so ordinary people would come here and be able to sort of get the benefit of enjoying this huge display, this huge spectacle that put them in the same room essentially as potentially the emperors, as the upper class, even though they were separated by rank. And this idea of the amphitheaters as the sort of place for spectacle that can create a civic unity, this sort of sense that we're all in this city together, is exported. And so as the Roman Empire spreads, it's sort of farming out these traditionally Roman models of governance and of civic identity that wind up all over the world. And so we still actually have plenty of amphitheaters outside of Rome itself. Here, 10 years ago, I got to go to the amphitheater in Arles in southern France. So in this place, we're seeing basically a mini version of the Colosseum. And again, this would have served as a place for ordinary citizens under the Roman Empire who were of this maybe Frankish identity, whatever tribes are settling here. And they would come and feel like a Roman coming to the show. And you can see here that the stadium seating is intact. And then underneath here, this is sort of this level where the wealthier people would enter at the street level, and then the less socially elite would enter higher, like the stairs that we saw previously at Pompeii. And this is the path that they would take to go to the seating. And this is the path that the gladiators might walk before they're set out to fight for their lives in the amphitheaters. And today, for specifically this particular theater, it's used for bullfighting and for concerts. So it's interesting that this legacy of civic entertainment has lasted. Ordinary people lived in a variety of different kinds of houses, but more or less following the basic plan that you see here. So we'll start here with the colored image, and then we'll look at the House of the Faun specifically. And so essentially, Romans are living in villas, which is sort of like a house complex. You would have an extended family living in the villa. So it wouldn't just be a nuclear family, but the familia would include servants and extended family members as well. And it's built in a sort of square model, rectangular model, with various points at the center that would allow you access to different parts of the house. And so here you can see in the part facing the street would be normally shops on the lower levels, and then perhaps housing or residential areas above. And the sort of porticos all around, these areas that are roofs that are supported by columns, create walkways with which you can access the other rooms of the house. And the house itself is designed around what we would basically call a peristylium or a peristyle. And this is a garden where you could grow food, but it also allows light and fresh air that's away from the city street to access the different parts of the house. Usually there's a garden in the middle, and then again, the columns around in the portico. Off of this area, you can see little rooms, different rooms that could be used for bedrooms, for offices, for places for visitors to be greeted, etc. And as you walk into the house, in the first place, you would pass by the Lares and Penates, and these are household gods, which we'll discuss shortly. In addition to all of the little rooms that border these central spaces, we also see here an atrium, and this is an open air area in the center of the house. Again, that's permitting light and air, but also serving as a sort of node so that you can cross it to go to different areas of the house. In the center of the atrium, we see what's called the impluvium, and this is a shallow pool underneath an opening in the roof known as the compluvium. And this opening, so imagine that there's all roof here, this opening would be sort of a square that's directly above the impluvium, so that when it does rain, all of the rain is sort of shuttered into the impluvium. And this can serve as a source of water, usually connected to some sort of cistern or water tank to provide for the house. On the left here, we see one of the biggest houses in Pompeii that's been preserved. Obviously not the whole thing, but just the floor plan. This is the House of the Faun. And just like in this image, we can see the atrium that has the impluvium and the compluvium. We can see the peristyled garden and then another garden here. So we know that this house was for very wealthy people. And again, these little rooms, the cubicula that border the various atria, it's plural of atrium. And here we see on the left an example of the peristyle. So these columns with these beautiful, as you remember, acanthus leaf decorated capitals in the Corinthian style, this providing sort of the foundation for the roof that's above and also enabling a walkway around the central area of the atrium. And then here we see a modern reconstruction of the impluvium and the compluvium. So you can really see how when it rains, the water is directed straight into this little pool. And sometimes there's a fountain or sometimes there's a statue, depending. So as I mentioned, religion being very important to the Roman people, part of this religion serving as an identifier and a uniter of everyone who belongs to Rome. So whether somebody's living in Britain, whether somebody's living in North Africa, whether somebody's in the Near East, all of these people identify as Roman citizens. Therefore, they are all responsible for venerating the Roman imperial family. So after Augustus's death, he is elevated to the rank of God, and he becomes one of the deities in this polytheistic religion to whom Roman citizens pray and worship. So here in the Ara Pacis Augusti, so this is the altar of peace of Augustus, created right before the turn of the millennium. This represents a series of victories, military victories in what is now modern day France and Spain. So Augustus, the emperor, comes back victorious, and this peace altar is built. So you have this monumental altar inside where people would go up and give gratitude to the sort of personified Pax, peace, this deity that sort of embodies peace. And also while you're there, thinking about Augustus and his power and the power of the Roman Empire and the power of the army. And so inside this peace altar, you're also coming face to face with this relief sculpture of the royal family, of the imperial family. And we can see that there's high relief to differentiate between the background and the foreground for the frontal figures here, and then low relief to give the sense of many people in layers behind these frontal figures. And we also see children. So this is an example of sort of promoting the royal family as larger than life, as these sort of guardians of Rome, and then also with this sort of subliminal idea that we should be creating more Roman people. One of Augustus's focuses of reform was to promote marriage and to produce more Roman children. So we can see also these gorgeous folds that give sort of volume to the bodies here. So I mentioned the Lares and Penates earlier. These are household gods, and each household in Rome would have these sort of ancestral gods. So they may be family members who've passed away. They may be sort of embodiments of good fortune and wealth and fecundity and all of the things that make a family of good status, right? And so here on the left, from Pompeii as well, we see this fresco. And we have the figure in the center that represents the paterfamilias. This is the father of the family, the head of the household. And in Rome, the paterfamilias had all of the power in the family. It was not shared among other family members. It's this very top-down hierarchical structure where the father gets the last say. And then on the sides of this paterfamilias figure, we have the lares. And the lares are these statues or these embodiments, as I mentioned, of the sort of hearth gods or goddesses. And so in the fresco here and in this statue as well, we can see that the lares are holding what are called cornucopiae. So the cornucopia, or the horn of plenty, is this ram's horn that's filled with all of these different symbols of fertility and plenty. So we often have grapes pouring out of it. And you guys might be familiar with the cornucopia from kind of those depictions of pilgrim Thanksgivings, where there's this like woven basket that's pouring out with food and wheat and all these things that are symbols that there's plenty at this table. And so the lares and penates would be situated near the entrance to the house so that as you enter, you're kind of coming face to face with the good graces of this household guardian. Ordinary people also used money. And so the coins from the Roman Empire are actually very telling with regards to how those in power wanted to be remembered and wanted to be depicted. So what you see here on the left are 2 denarii, and a denarius is a silver coin compared to the aureus, which is a gold coin. And the silver coin ultimately is worth roughly a day's wages for a laborer. So today it might be the equivalent of about 50 bucks. So the denarius, which you can see is stamped irregularly in these 2 examples, right? It doesn't line up exactly with the circular shape. The denarius is an opportunity, as are all of these coins, for depicting the person who minted the coin. And in this case, we've got 2 rulers. On the top, we have Caesar, Julius Caesar, and we can see his name here inscribed. And he's depicted in this profile with what we would call an aquiline nose, right? This Roman nose that's very long, almost peaked or hooked nose, which we can see even better here in this image of Cleopatra. But Caesar is wearing his laurels. And so this is a symbol of prestige. It's an honor that is granted. And so today when we have poet laureates, they symbolically are given the laurels. And we can see he's got a very severe look and really is embodying all of those aspects of proper leadership. On the bottom, minted actually 1 year before the defeat of Mark Antony and Cleopatra by Augustus, we see Cleopatra in a very, very similar masculinized image. And again, not the laurels, but she's got a headband. Her hair is pulled back, mimicking the same kind of hairstyle that Julius Caesar here is wearing. And she has a very severe look. She's depicted as somewhat older, even though a lot of images of Cleopatra show her as a very young, sensual kind of character. But again, embodying leadership, right? So even as a woman on the arm of Mark Antony here, she is fulfilling the state's role. Another hallmark of Rome with regards to ordinary daily life is how good its infrastructure was. And so all throughout the Roman Empire, Rome, as I mentioned, was exporting its particular Roman styles, right, with this rounded vault that we would come to call Romanesque. And what you see here is actually an aqueduct. So this is something that is carrying water. And the aqueduct functions by accessing a spring or some sort of pool of drinkable water and using gravity and a very, very, very gentle slope, the water is funneled into city centers to be made use of by people living there. And so the Pont du Gard, which is a particular very, very famous aqueduct in southern France near the city of Nîmes, which is still standing today, and I've actually walked across it, which is very exciting. You can see that there are 3 tiers of arches. And so this part can be walked on, and then the water is funneled across on the very, very tippy top. And so what this does is it provides not only this imposing structure where, if you think about Rome expanding, it is marking the territories that it's conquering by building the civic infrastructure. And so as a result, anybody who is like laying eyes on this is reminded of the might and the power of Rome stemming out of the nodal city of Rome itself. In addition, this would have been built out of limestone blocks that are so excellently carved that there's no need for mortar. So in addition to this being a mark of empire, this is also a mark of exquisitely precise engineering, which the Romans were very good at. And if you've heard this phrase, all roads lead to Rome, you might think that the Roman road system as well is a marker of this, right? They built roads that transgress all of their empire all across the Mediterranean, which the armies could use, which chariots could use, which businesses and trade ventures could use. And all of them come back to Rome as this heart of empire. So in addition to seeing this expression of power, ordinary citizens in places like Nîmes would look at this and be proud of it, right? They helped to build it. It's a mark of excellent architectural prestige and skill. And so they would look at this and be grateful for its water, but also proud of its structure. In terms of daily activities for normal Roman people, and when I say Roman, I'm talking about citizens of the empire, no matter where they are geographically, we see that exercise and sport plays a very large role in daily life. And this is obviously depicted here on the left in what we call the Casale bikini women. And so this is in a Sicilian house, a villa. and it's a mosaic. So a mosaic is a specific art form that uses tiny, tiny pieces of glass, pieces of stone maybe, or pieces of ceramic that are pressed into some sort of mortar, some sort of concrete-like substance that will hold them in place. And you can use all different shapes. So instead of having, squared off shapes like you would see in tiling, the mosaics are all little broken pieces in various shapes. So here on the left, we have a series of women in bikinis who are carrying out all kinds of different athletic activities and competitions. So we can see at the top, this woman is sort of running with weights. We have a woman throwing what looks like a discus or some sort of frisbee or ball. We have more ball playing down here. And then here we can see the winner of whatever this athletic competition is. And she's got the crown and then also the palm plant, which serves as her kind of trophy. So these kinds of things would be carried out, in smaller scale all the time by Romans. And then on the right, we have the bath system. And so for the Roman baths, these were just like the amphitheaters, a place for people to come publicly and to encounter people of all different walks of life. But in the baths, compared to the amphitheater, all different social statuses would mix. And so this is really a sort of democratizing daily practice or ritual. And the baths that you see specifically here are in the town now called Bath in England, which is famous for its Roman baths. The baths would be a whole sort of process. So you would go and you would move from rooms of various heats, from the very, very hot caldarium to the very, very cold frigidarium. And as you would go, you would perform certain activities and practices associated with each section and the sort of progression through the baths. And this would be a place that would not only enable you to encounter others, but also to reap the benefits of being a citizen, because these are civic structures, right? They're built by the state and they're for the use of citizens. And then finally, some of the most enjoyable glimpses into the life of daily people are when we find little remnants of the ordinary person's voice, right? So much of our sources come from the upper classes, who are literate classes, who are in positions of authority. But in cases like this, where we can actually find graffiti, we get these little windows into ordinary life. And so in a series of graffiti posts in Pompeii, we archaeologists have discovered not only extremely graphic and sexual commentary, but also just some funny little glimpses. And so I've included a couple here for you. So one man wrote, "If anyone does not believe in Venus, that is the god of love and beauty, goddess of love and beauty, they should gaze at my girlfriend." So here he is bragging. Another just simply complains, "The man I'm having dinner with is a barbarian." This is a derogatory term for the Germanic people who are non-Roman citizens. And then finally, this little meta commentary, "Oh, walls, you have held up so much tedious graffiti that I'm amazed that you have not already collapsed in ruin." So these little details give us a sense of how day-to-day life functioned in this extremely geographically sprawling territory that on the one hand preserves local traditions and religion and culture, and then on the other hand unites everybody under this umbrella term of being a Roman citizen, united not only by worshiping the same gods in addition to one's native gods, but also by looking at the art and architecture that Rome has created and instilled all over its colonies as this unifying identity. So here are a couple of vocabulary terms. Good luck on your quiz. Thank you.